Hello everyone, my name is Elliot Geltz, and today I have a very special video for you. Any of my 20 subscribers at this point in the channel's lifetime may take note of the fact that out of all the videos I've uploaded in the couple of weeks the channel's been active, the most popular by far was the Warhammer video. It is currently sitting at 160 something views when none of my other videos have managed to break 100. So I was always planning on making more Warhammer related content and talking more about the setting in the books, but I wasn't planning on doing another one so soon. But for the sake of helping the channel get some get up and go, we are going to be talking about Warhammer a little bit more. More specifically, we are going to be talking about my 5 favorite of the Imperial factions. 5 factions that are loyalist to the Imperium of Man out of everything in the setting. I settled on this because I made the first video as an introduction for people, and assuming people would go, hey, I like this setting. Let me look more at it. Let me start with the human guys, like the human faction. That's always a good place to start with a sci-fi setting. The Imperium's big. Like I said in the video, the Imperium of Man covers literally countless factions, including fan-made factions and whatnot, on top of everything that's canon, and there's a lot that's canon. So it's easy to get lost in. So anyone looking for a good place to start, I have my 5 favorite factions and a whole bunch of speculation about them. I am going to talk about things that are not canon to the series. They're just fan fluff and fan theory that I really like. I'm also going to touch on certain story beats and whatnot that, if you're new to the franchise, you might get lost in. The complete timeline of Warhammer 40k is impossible to make. But I will be making complete timeline videos in the future over different chunks of the complete narrative of the setting, starting from where it begins to whenever I make those videos, where the setting gets up to at that point. So, as a starting point for anyone that's new to the setting, these are my 5 favorite factions that are loyalist to the Imperium of Man. And we're going to start from the bottom up. We're going to start with number 5, the Sisters of Silence. So, there are certain people in the setting of Warhammer 40k born with the special ability to tap into the extra dimensional space that demons and magic come from to use magic powers. These people are called Psykers. Now, parallel to Psykers are people born with a gene that makes them anti-Psyker. It makes them the inverse of a Psyker. Whereas a Psyker is a person that is more in touch with the warp and can draw upon it to do magical stuff. A blank is a person that kind of doesn't have a soul. At least that's how it's referred to in the universe. What that exactly means isn't particularly sure. Like, we're fairly confident it doesn't literally mean they have no soul, they don't go anywhere, like to the warp or to any god when they die. It just kind of means they're the inverse of a psyker. Like, whereas a normal person dying and going to the warp creates like a droplet dropping in a pond of a ripple effect. A psyker dying and going to the warp or touching on the warp to use their powers is like a bucket of water being dumped into a pond and creating a ripple effect that's significantly larger. Whereas a blank would be the equivalent of a person dying and like the tiniest little molecule of H2O is transmuted from the air into the pond. That's how little of an impact they have on the warp and on magical things. They're just that disconnected from it. That's what a blank is. The Sisters of Silence are a military organization that is a part of the Astra Telepathica. That means the branch of Imperial governance that manages telepaths that send messages to and from different planets over the vast distances of space. These are the people that manage astropaths, which are the psychers specifically bred and with the ability to navigate the warp when ships jump into it to warp jump great distances over space. Like in Star Wars with hyperspace drives and whatnot, you can't really physically move from one point to another, like one planet to another. It takes fucking forever, even if you were moving at the speed of light. Ships in Warhammer 40k don't move at the speed of light; they move at the speed of hell. They they open up a rift to the warp, to literal hell, and go into it. And riding the tides of the warp, they pop back out, functionally time traveling. They pop back out in a different point, hopefully closer to where they want it to be. A whole lot of times it doesn't work like that, and you pop out backwards in time or way forward in time or just nowhere close to where you want it to be. It's very unreliable, and astropaths are psychers to help make that more reliable as a means of travel between planets. The Astra Telepathica is the overarching governance that manages that as a part of other things, such as the Sisters of Silence. At this point in the story, the Emperor of Man, after being grievously wounded, sits upon the Golden Throne and powers the Astronomicon, this massive psychic flare, like a lighthouse that can be seen all throughout the Milky Way galaxy by anyone that's a psyker. The astropaths use the Astronomicon. There's a lot of astro going on. I'm going to get tongue-tied. The astropaths use it as a reference point. So looking out with their psychic vision, they can see the Astronomicon there, so far away, relative to where they are, and from these 2 points they can triangulate where they want to be and use that as a reference to navigate through the warp. That is how astropath travel via long-range ships works. The Emperor on the throne needs fuel to stay alive, and every day countless thousands of psychers are sacrificed to him to keep his power going. The Sisters of Silence are the ones that go out and hunt psychers to bring back to Terra to fuel the throne and the Emperor upon it. Every sister is a blank. Every single one of them is disconnected from the warp in such a way that not only are they not going to make much of a fuss if/when they die and their soul goes to the warp, they are also practically immune to the effects of psychers and their spells. So let's say you're a psyker and you shoot a fireball at a Sister of Silence. That fireball, once it gets within a certain reach, will just dissipate into sparks. It just cannot get within a certain range of them. There are limits to this immunity. If you're a psyker and you shoot a fireball, it won't touch them. But if you're a psyker and you telepathically or telekinetically pick up a car and chuck it at them, the inertia of the car generated by your psychic powers isn't going to be stopped. And the Sister of Science needs to get the hell out of the way or get smushified by the car you chucked at her. That's how their field of resistance works. Psychic effects can't get within a certain radius of them, but psychers do have alternatives to deal with sisters if they're clever enough. Most aren't. Most get high on their own juice, think they're untouchable shit, face the sisters, start shooting fireballs and lightning, no effect, and the sisters just shank them. The sisters are sent to deal with psychers that are military threats, like Chaos Sorcerers, or rebel psychers that have appeared within the Imperium and rebel against it. They also go out and kidnap psychers that aren't particularly powerful or threatening. If your power with the warp is very weak, you're still on the radar if you get found out, and these sisters are very likely to come track you down and yoink you to take you to the throne to get juicified for the Emperor. Now, out of the scale of psyker power, from super weak, so only good for fuel for the throne, and super strong, so very likely to be a threat to the Imperium and need to get fought and killed, there's a very sweet middle ground where psychers can be found useful for the Imperium and get drafted into the military. These are called sanctioned psychers. These sisters also capture these psychers, investigate them, figure out how loyal they are, what their intentions are with their powers, and if the psyker isn't particularly strong enough to be a great threat, they can get drafted into the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, as a sanctioned psyker, or as a part of other fields of service where their powers can be used for the Imperium. The sisters handle all psychers from one end of the scale to the other. These sisters are very closely related to the Custodes. The Custodes being the guards that surround the Emperor and protect him and are much like the Astartes, the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, but handcrafted by the Emperor. Like, these are Marines that are +1. These are perfect. This, a Custodes, is the most powerful a mortal human being can be made without being a Primarch or the Emperor. These are the top shelf guys, which, now that I think about it, I'm I'm going to leave Rogue Traders up here because Rogue Traders are very interesting and they flesh out the setting. But if I'm being honest, Custodes need a place in my top five, and out of the five, I'm reconsidering some things. I made my chart too early. I'm sorry. I should have thought this through better. But anyway, the Sisters of Silence are very closely related to the Custodes, and they work with them very often. Deep within the Palace of Terror, there is a rift in the warp that is constantly open to demons, and the Custodes have to constantly fight against. The Sisters of Silence, being anti-psyker and anti-warp shenanigans, are very helpful in this endeavor and very often fight alongside the Custodes in these efforts. The Sisters are also just solid units. Like, they're very strong, they're very fast, they wield very powerful weapons, they have very durable armor. They're probably one of the only people in the entire Imperium, short of like the highest levels of Astartes chapters and whatnot, that can fight at the level alongside Custodes. These are probably some of the only mortals that can keep up with them in any regard. Don't make no mistake, the Custodes outclass the Sisters by leagues and miles. But the Sisters are probably one of the only military factions that are strong enough, fast enough, clever enough, tactically sound enough to keep pace with Custodes in the threats and endeavors the Custodes are dealing with. So the Sisters of Silence, super cool. Moving on. Next up on our list is the Rogue Traders. Now, there are a great deal of laws and bindings on citizens of the Imperium about what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think, what you're allowed to believe. It is very much a fascist dictatorship. The Imperium is not fun. Unless you're a rogue trader. Rogue traders are people that have been given special permits by the governance of Terra to basically fuck off and do whatever they want. They have a special parchment, a special slip, a formal document that certifies them as a rogue trader and gives them permission to do a whole bunch of things a normal citizen can't. They can do trade with Xenos. They can faff about in uncharted territory and chart new worlds. They can go up to Space Marine chapters or the Adeptus Mechanicus or a whole bunch of people, and instead of being servile, go, hey, let's make a deal. Like, they can trade and brook with different factions that a normal mundane mortal would have to kowtow to, but a rogue trader gets to stand on equal footing and be like, hey, let's work something out. Let's work to our mutual benefit. Whereas a normal person would have to kneel and be subservient to an Adeptus Astartes. Now, that's not to say a rogue trader can just waltz onto an Astartes ship and act like he owns the place. And it's not to say that if an Astartes has the upper hand in literal, tangible manpower and firepower in the meeting, he can't threaten the rogue trader into doing what he wants or he'll blast him. It's just that on a political and permission level, a rogue trader can have the resources and permissions to stand on equal footing, potentially, with these different other factions. Now, what a rogue trader does varies from rogue trader to rogue trader. Like I said, they can engage in trade with a whole bunch of factions normal merchants can't, such as alien civilizations. Rogue traders will trade with the Eldar, the Tau, other sanctioned Imperial xenospecies, which are few and far between. But rogue traders are allowed to trade with them. Rogue traders can also be explorers, going out into uncharted space to chart worlds for the Imperium. They can also be evangelicals. Particularly religious rogue traders can make it their mission to go out and bring the religion of the Emperor's worship to new planets with humans on them that may not have made contact with the Imperium yet. Also of note is that, in a sense, the rogue traders were the beginning. The very, very, very first iterations of Warhammer lore came from the perspective of a rogue trader, like decades ago when the franchise first started. So, on that basis alone, just being the center point of the franchise's history, rogue traders are very important, both in universe and out. Moving on to the spiciest and I the most milquetoast and at the same time most spicy addition to the list, we have Gilliman and his Ultramarines. Now, if you're new to the fandom, there was a period of history where the Ultramarines, one of the Astartes Space Marine chapters, were very heavily favored, let's say, by a preeminent author of Black Library named Matt Ward. Ward wrote a whole bunch of books where the Ultramarines were, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, they were jacked off to high hell. They were made the biggest, coolest, cool guy Mary Sue faction of the setting, and a whole lot of people didn't like that. A whole lot of people still feel bad blood over that. I don't. And I don't because they've gotten a whole bunch of new lore since then, including the return of Gilliman. Gilliman is a Primarch. He is one of the 20 genetic sons of the Emperor that the Emperor crafted to help him conquer the galaxy. The Emperor lost his sons to Chaos, who took them and flung them out across the stars. And when the Emperor started his Great Crusade, one of his primary objectives was locating and recovering his sons, one of which was Gilliman. Gilliman is very much a statesman. He is a politician. He is all about diplomacy and negotiation and the governance of the realm. Out of all of the Primarchs, he is the one that is most suited to having a place outside of war. He is the one that is most at home behind a desk, managing bureaucracy, managing taxes, managing the distribution of resources. To the extent that out of all of the Primarchs, Gilliman was not only the one that had most conquered his world that he landed on, he had conquered 500 worlds. He had conquered almost the entirety of the Ultramar system where he landed when Chaos flung him out into the stars. And most of them, he didn't conquer through military strength. He had approached diplomatically and negotiated with and shown all the splendor of Ultramar and convinced people by his own charisma and his own reasoning to join his little empire. And that's wildly impressive. People don't give him enough credit for that, in all honesty. In the face of Primarchs that conquered the single world they landed on and was by brute force, and Primarchs like Kurz and Angron that didn't conquer their worlds, conquering 500 and shedding the least blood out of all of his brothers. Like that's a feat. That's a feat that is deserving of praise. Going on past the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, shortly after which, Gilliman was doing battle with Fulgrim, one of the traitor Primarchs, who injured him so grievously, Gilliman had to be put in a stasis unit to be preserved, otherwise he would die. Recently, in the 42nd millennium, in the more modern, recent lore of the setting, Gilliman was revived through the efforts of Belisarius Cawl, a very radical Adeptus Mechanicus priest, Yvraine, an Eldar lady that has gotten around. She has actually been a part of pretty much every Eldar faction. She was a craft worlder, she was a pirate, she got roped into the Drukhari. I'm pretty sure she was a part of the Exodites at some point. She's been everywhere and been a part of everything. A big part of her plans for the Eldar and trying to get them out of the thumb of Slaanesh was resurrecting Gilliman so that he could make his return as one of the first returning Primarchs and lead the Imperium, which the Imperium and the Eldar aren't exactly allies, but they're as close to allies as you're going to get in this setting. The Imperium is a very nice distraction and meat shield Yvraine can use to hold back the majority of the galaxy's threats, while she and her Eldar cohorts are working on getting out from under Slaanesh. That's their relationship. But the point being, Yvraine helps bring Gilliman back, and in the modern day, he is back, baby. He is ruling the Imperium, he is leading it against its enemies. You can read all about that in the Plague Wars books, one of which I have here, Godblight. It's a very good book. It covers Gilliman defending Ultramar from Mortarion, another of the traitor Primarchs. I like it. May not want it for your first 40k book. If you're just getting into things, the lore about what is just now happening might be a bit much. You may want to rewind it back to some older novels, especially the best of the older novels, as your first foothold in. Oh boy. Some of those older novels are a better starting point, but once you have a solid feel for who Gilliman is, who the Primarchs are, what Chaos is, why the traitor Primarchs betrayed the Emperor, once you have a good foothold on all of that stuff, I highly recommend Godblight. It's very good. The reason Gilliman and his Ultramarines make this list is they come around from being the Mary Sue, Master of All losers that Matt Ward made them into a very potent human Astartes Legion. Like, a lot of the Ultramarines grapple with their own humanity in ways that are very relatable. A lot of them wonder if they're good enough for the heroes they look up to. A lot of them ponder their failures, which, shocker, the Ultramarines can fail, and they have, and they're really sad about it. And most importantly, their Primarch is back, and they're interacting with him. One of the scenes that made me love Gilliman and made him one of my favorite Primarchs was a scene where an Ultramarine captain was doing battle with Death Guard forces, the Sons of Mortarion, and sacrificed a great deal, including his own life, to save his men from an attack, so that they could escape and continue with their mission. This Marine then wakes up in a dreadnought being a massive sarcophagus mech unit that takes a Marine that is on death's door and puts him in a life support system, rendering him down to pretty much just his nervous system organs, so that he can continue living and pilot this machine in service of the Emperor. If that sounds like a claustrophobic sensory deprivation nightmare, it is! And realizing what he is in, this Marine starts to have a panic attack the second he wakes up. Which, bro, understandable. However, in the middle of his panic attack, Gilliman walks in. And this Marine is seeing his Primarch for the first time. As if I remember correctly, he didn't even know Gilliman was awake. The news hadn't reached him and his men yet. So he goes from on the battlefield fighting for his life to sacrificing his life to waking up in the sensory deprived nightmare that is a dreadnought to rebounding back to seeing his Gene Father standing before him, a legendary hope so few were still holding on to. And Gilliman approaches him and goes, "Hey, my son, I am so proud of you. You did so good out there. You saved so many of your brother's lives. Look," and Gilliman pulls up the feed. His brothers went on to accomplish that objective. They fought back the Death Guard. They suffered horrible losses, and the Marine is also hurt deeply by all the brothers he lost. But Gilliman's like, "No, you did so well. You are a success. You and your brothers did everything you set out to do. Those sacrifices were not in vain. And you saved so many civilians and so many of your brothers who got to retreat and fight on another day because of your sacrifice. Here's a medal." And when I phrase it like that, it sounds pedantic and silly. But he pins a medal to the Dreadnought chassis. And for a Primarch, their Primarch, this Marine's Primarch, his father, to bestow that honor upon him and say, "I am proud of you. You fought so well. Are you still willing to serve the Emperor? I will give you peace. I will shut down your dreadnought and let you sleep eternal if rest is what you want because you have earned it. But are you willing to continue your service? Will you keep serving me and our Emperor?" And the dreadnought goes from having a panic attack to going, "Fuck yes I am. Give me the biggest guns you have. I want to go fight." And just the touching father and son story that is. That Gilliman's love means so much to his Ultramarines. That in the worst nightmare a Marine can find himself in, being sealed in a dreadnought, never knowing what touch is again, never seeing with his own eyes, only seeing the world around him through optical cameras. Like, that's horrible. That's a nightmare. And the fact that Gilliman's love and approval means so much to these Marines, that just having him come in and say, "Hey, I'm proud of you. I love you, my son. Will you keep working with me?" is enough to pull them out of the despair of being locked in a dreadnought. That's fucking great. That's great storytelling. That is so human and touching. And that is what makes Gilliman and the Ultramarines mean so much. We have Primarchs like Kurz and Angron that fucking hated their sons and didn't give a shit about them. We have Primarchs like Dorn and who's another one? Ferris. They cared about their sons, but we never got this deep human father-son bond outside of tragedy and how hurt their sons are at their losses. But here with Gilliman, we see him approach his sons and go, "I love you. I am proud of you. You have done so much good, and I am proud to be called your father." That shit, like, 40K is a series about goofy space aliens and dudes in goofy big pauldron armor shoot big bang gun at goofy monster aliens. It is so silly and nonsensical at times. And all of that is a shell covering stories about very human encounters, like the Primarchs loving their sons and their sons loving them back. My dogs are freaking the fuck out. I hope that doesn't pop up on mic. So between that last cut and now, like after that cut where my dogs were freaking the fuck out, between there and now, I had to go to work. So if the rest of this video seems a little more low energy compared to how hard I was freaking out over how much I love Gilman and the Ultramarines, that would be why. While I was at work, my coworker brought in her dogs, and I got to pet them, and they were fluffy and adorable. And that has nothing to do with Warhammer 40k, but that meant a lot to me. That made my night, and I just wanted to share that with you. Anyway, while I was at work, I thought of another thing. If you're not tired of me ranting and raving about everyone's least favorite Primarch, I thought of another thing that I love about Gilliman. So during the Horus Heresy, half of the Primarchs stayed loyal to the Emperor and half defected and became traitors for chaos, for their own reasons, a whole bunch of reasons. Out of those traitors were Perturabo, or was Perturabo, who was Primarch of the Iron Warriors. The Iron Warriors being the legion most associated and most skilled at siege warfare and breaking defensive establishments of enemy factions in war. That was their whole shtick. So anyway, Perturabo turned traitor, and like with a whole lot of legions, not all of his sons were keen on that. Like, it's kind of a passed over story beat at this point, but out of the World Eaters, out of the Luna Wolves, out of the Iron Warriors, out of every traitor faction, there were still Marines that were loyal to the Emperor and the Imperium. Now, most of those Marines were killed in very swift, clandestine purges in operations meant to isolate them so that their traitor brothers could murder them in cold blood. However, some managed to escape. Some of Perturabo's Iron Warriors managed to escape, and not knowing what to do without their Primarch, without their Legion, without any kind of support or anything, they just went. They just went and tried to make contact with loyalists so that they could warn them about what was going on. Knowing that with all of this suspicion about who's loyalist and who's traitor going on, they weren't likely to be listened to. They weren't likely to be trusted after the Iron Warriors had turned traitor and were attacking loyalist legions, but they felt that was still the right thing to do and did their best to do it. This splinter of Iron Warriors made contact with the Ultramarines and Gilliman believed them. On top of that, Marines... So, as a military organization, Space Marines need support. They need a continuous supply of ammunition, materials to make repairs to their armor, to their guns, to their ships, serfs to keep their ships and organizations running with menial work, they need constant support to operate. There is no, oh, just go off and do your own thing. Like, even in the modern 42nd Millennium setting, Marine chapters and legions that do that are on the brink of death constantly. Like fleet based chapters that are very isolated and need to scavenge and trade for their supplies are just constantly on the edge of running out and being screwed. Because as a military force, Astartes are just like that. They're shock troopers for the most part. They're meant to be a part of a larger army that they are spearheading for that can support them. So Astartes being on their own just isn't a thing that works out very well for them. So Gilliman encounters these loyalist Iron Warriors who have nowhere else to go, who have no support whatsoever, and knows they're loyal. He knows they're true in their hearts. He knows they're being sincere when they say they're still loyalists. To give them a home, he adopts them. He adopts his nephews and gives them the cover of the Silver Skulls. The Silver Skulls are a successor chapter to the Ultramarines that have their own little quirks and whatnot that aren't particularly important to this story. But one of the main things is that their lineage as Gilliman's sons has always been questioned. And multiple times in quasi modern setting times, like a significant amount of time after the heresy, but not up to the 41st and 42nd millennium where we're at now, their gene seed was thoroughly tested, and oh, this is all Gilliman's stock. However, that leaves a big window of time where their gene seed wasn't known, and especially the founding members of the Silver Skulls, like, no one knew the truth of who they are. And for the most part, it's been up in the air. But given their iconography, the style of armor they use, their tactics very closely resembling the Iron Warriors, like, it's very commonly known to be that Gilliman adopted these Iron Warriors and gave them the cover of being an Ultramarine successor so that he could give them a place to serve the Imperium, so that he could give them a home. And once again, once again, this human fatherly touch to Gilliman. I fucking love this man. Like, I don't see how you couldn't. Like, if you were there for the Matt Ward era where the Ultramarines were jacked off to high hell, like, I get it. It was annoying and all of that. But how can you look at this man and just not love him? This is a sci-fi story, and going all the way back to Frankenstein, sci-fi is about shitty fathers. And here, in the midst of one of the most brutal settings in all of fiction, we have a fantastic father. How can you not love him? So anyway, Gilliman and the Ultramarines, I adore them. They're easily one of my favorite factions. Moving on to the second tier of our list, we have the Adeptus Sororitas. Oh boy, okay, so, to cover a lot of history. There came a period in the Imperium's history after the Horus Heresy called the Age of Apostasy. And to condense a whole lot of it, this one dude named Goj Vandire came to incredible political and spiritual power in the Imperium as the ecclesiarch, as the head of the Imperium's church worshipping the Emperor, and in the administratum, the governing body that handles the day-to-day bureaucracy of the Imperium. This gave him a lot of power over a great many facets and branches of Imperial government. This caused issues, and it all came to a head in this great conflict where Goj Vandire and his forces ended up going to battle on Holy Terra itself. Now, Goj had a all-female bodyguard faction called the Brides of the Emperor. And during the battle with other forces and more loyal, actual loyalist forces on Terra, the Brides of the Emperor were throwing down with the Custodes, which I just want to say right now, the Custodes were going easy on them. Very much so. That's 100% apparent. These mortal, normal women were throwing down in battle against the Custodes, who could see that these women were fine soldiers, distinctly loyal to the emperor. They were just being misled by this one dickhead that had taken all this political power. So, Constantine Valdor, the leader of the Custodes, it said he took the leader of the brides of the emperor and took her to meet the emperor. I like to believe that in his Ormite armor, he just walked out shrugging off bullets and bolter shells and grabbed her by the scruff of her neck and walked her back into the palace. That's the visual I think of. Because I like to imagine he's just done with all this shit and wants to get it over with. So he takes the leader of the Brides of the Emperor, a lady named Alicia Dominica, and Alicia has a meeting with the Emperor. She is carried into the throne room where the Emperor is interred on the Golden Throne. What happened in there, we have no idea. However, when she came out, she was convinced of Goja's heresy and murdered him in cold blood. That redeemed the brides of the emperor in the eyes of pretty much everybody. Like, okay, they're on our side now. And they were reformed into the daughters of the emperor, which eventually evolved and became the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. Now, the reason the sisters are so important is that they are the main military body of the ecclesiarchy. After the Age of Apostasy, the ecclesiarchy was checked down in power with a measure saying they could not field men for battle. And the sisters are not men. So the ecclesiarchy is allowed to have a standing army as long as it is the sororitas. Now, it is important to note that the full body of the Adeptus Sororitas is not just the Sisters of Battle. The Sisters of Battle are the women that go out to the front lines and fight the enemies of the Imperium. However, there are other orders alongside the Sisters of Battle called Sisters Hospitaliere. I am not pronouncing that correctly. I don't care. I just got off work. I'm tired. That are more about support and setting up field hospitals and treating the injured of war, and at times handling the logistics and organization of war, while the Sisters of Battle are the orders that go out and do the actual fighting. Now, the Sisters are home to some of the goofier things in the Imperium's arsenal. They have tanks that are massive organs that the Sisters play as instruments. And as the sister is playing the organ, rockets are shooting out of the pipes. it's, it's so stupid. I love it so much. These sisters are also incredibly devout and sing hymns and praises of the emperor in battle. So you have this whole war going on against Xenos races on a planet the Imperium is trying to conquer, or against Chaos Cultists. And the entire time, as the sisters are shooting their guns or their flamers, they are singing hymns and singing about how great the Emperor is. And that's scary. That they can keep their cool and hit their high notes while shooting their bolters. That's crazy. A main thing I personally like about the sisters is that they're evil. They are so evil. They are easily one of the most awful factions in the Imperium. There is a practice where the Mechanicum, or at least Mechanicum adjacent factions that make use of Mechanicum technology, will raise cherubim, which are these cloned human babies that are raised in vats and then taken and then spliced with all kinds of cybernetic shit that lets them float around on little hover jets and do menial tasks. It's like a PDA, but it's a baby that is suffering all the time. And these sisters use a lot of them, and servitors, which are humans that have failed in their menial jobs or aren't protective enough or whatever, that have been lobotomized and once again spliced with a bunch of cyborg shit, so that they are these little robots that do menial shit like open doors or run computers. So like you're working your 16-hour a day factory job and the annual consensus rolls around, and oh, you're the lowest performing worker, get fucked, and you get yanked off site, and a tech priest lobotomizes you and screws with your brain and rips your head off and plugs it into a door. And you're just going to spend the rest of eternity operating this door. Whenever someone walks up, they're like, servitor, open door. And your brain goes and opens the door. Yeah, that sucks. The sisters do a lot of that. They also have this very regimented policy in regards to fleeing from battle, which for a normal organization like the Astra Militarum or any of the others, you would just die. You would just get shot for fleeing battle and being a coward. The sisters give you a chance. If you're caught fleeing from battle as one of these sisters, you are taken and chastised and beaten to shit and whipped and horribly tortured. And then you are bound up in these awful, grotesque, like, bindings and barbed wire and all this shit. And then you are put in the Repentia. The Repentia being a branch of the sisters that are full of sisters that fled battle and have had this happen to them. And they are put back in battle in the worst battles. They are specifically flown out to the most intense front lines of the Imperium. And they are given no armor, no supplies, no nothing. Just a weird little robe thing and a massive chainsword. And you are told, go. Go fight the enemy. No armor, nothing. Just get in there. Make it happen. And if you can survive that battle, you're back in. Like, whatever your sin was that got you in the Repentia, you're forgiven for. And it's even seen as a great honor to be put in the Repentia and then to make it out again. You're seen as having, like, cleansed any sin that's in you. That's the first level. If you are caught fleeing from battle in the Repentia, you are taken and you are once again beat and tortured and just kicked while you're down. And then you are plugged into a penitent engine, which, you remember the dreadnought, the thing I said was a horrible nightmare? This is a dreadnought that is made to torture you. So you are plugged into it, and your brain is jacked with all sorts of stuff that makes it so that you only feel fear and pain and nothing that's pleasant at all. And you pilot this machine into war, and you are stuck in there until you die. Have fun with that, champ. They're so awful. Oh, I left out the best part. While you're in the Repentia, there is a matron that is in charge over you, and she has a whip that is like electrified. So while you're being charged into battle, you're being spurred on by this crazy lady who's screaming at you and whipping you with an electro whip that is also electrocuting you. So that's fun. I really love the sisters. They have this very unique flavor out of all the factions. They have a whole bunch of claims to fame, like being the only female-only faction. Like, there's the witch cults of the Drukhari and whatnot. But the sisters are the only faction that is, like, 100% girl power. And it's for this reason that is entirely cohesive in its own narrative because of the ecclesiarchy measure no men can be drafted for battle. Like, it makes perfect sense. It's not shoehorned in. And it gives them this nice, unique feeling on top of being horrible, horrible monsters. And they just look cool. Like, look up any canon art of the Sisters of Battle. Don't look up anything else. There's some shit out there. There's some Slaneshi shit out there. Look up canon art. Look up, like, cool wallpapers and stuff. Don't look up the other thing. They look dope. They look dope. They're cool as hell. They have cool lore. They have this nice niche fitting in the setting. I love the sisters. I think they're a great addition to the narrative. Moving on to my number one. This is my favorite two factions. I lied to you, but it's been on the board since the beginning, so it's not really a lie if you could see it the whole time. We have the Carcharodons, which are a loyalist Imperial faction. And we have the Night Lords, a traitor faction from the first founding, Conrad Kurz's sons. Now, why are these together at the top spot? I'll explain that shortly, but I'm going to go into the individual characteristics of why I love them both, and then I'm going to get into why I'm lumping them together. So, The Carcharodons. The Carcharodons are fucking cool. They are a shark themed chapter, in case you don't know Latin and don't know what Carcharodon means. Um, Very much like the Space Wolves and their wolf shit, the Carcharodons are all about sharks. They have shark iconography all over them. They have a massive tank with a big alien shark in it on their primary ship monastery. They favor chain weapons to simulate like the churning teeth of a shark. It's really cool. It's not as overplayed as the wolves and their wolfy McWolfenstein wolf mountain wolf shit. It's not like everything is shark labeled. So it's just enough to give it that nice twang of, hey, our icon's a cool animal without being too much like the wolves. Something else I love is, like I said, they use chain weapons. And lots of Astartes and whatnot use chain weapons, like the World Eaters, the Wolves. Like, it's a very common thing. The Carcharodons are unique in that they are almost entirely a stealth-based chapter. Their whole battle doctrine is about stealth and sneaking and being unseen and approaching unseen. Now, they share that with the Night Lords, the Raven Guard, the Alpha Legion. What makes the Carcharodons unique? The Carcharodons are to the other stealth-based chapters, like Metal Gear is to other stealth games. Like, they are all about, whereas the Alpha Legion is all about subterfuge and infiltration and masquerading as the enemy, and the Night Lords are all about fear tactics and putting on these grand displays where everyone knows they're there, and there's these grotesque displays to strike fear into everybody. It's just a matter of where specifically the Night Lords are. And the Raven Guard is all about sabotage and flanking maneuvers and things like that. The Carcharodons are all about approaching unseen and then murdering the fuck out of everything they see. There's a book all about them called Silent Hunter. I have it right here. You can't see it, its name in the shadow. And also my camera is only 1080p, so even if you zoomed in. But right here is Silent Hunters by, what's his name? Eduardo Albert. I love that book because it puts on full display what makes the Carcharodon's approach to battle so terrifying and so unique. In that, when they approach an enemy force for battle, that enemy will not know they are present until everyone is dead. The Carcharodons will approach in dead silence, in perfect stealth, go in amongst the enemy, and stealth kill literally everyone there. And they do this, one, because it's wildly effective, and two, it makes for a great use of the terror tactics that their cousins, the Night Lords, or I'm going to put cousins in air quotes given what I'm about to say after this, the terror tactics that they're famous for. Because what the Carcharodons will do, instead of putting on these grand displays so that everyone knows they're there and everyone's afraid, they will slowly pick off one by one enemy combatants until the great leaders and champions of the enemy force are all that's left. And having seen that something is picking off their men, their boots are going to get rattled and they will be afraid. So that is how the Carcharodons kind of debuff and wear down great enemy combatants, is that it's not by other means that other legions would do, is by slowly, stealthily picking off the bits and smaller pieces of their forces until only the core is left, and then these strongest enemy warriors in that core are going to be rattled. They're going to be afraid of whatever it is that's picking off their men. That's how the Carcharodons do things. And they also do this with chain weapons, which, if you're unfamiliar with chain weapons are swords, axes, even fist weapons that have a chainsaw built into them. A chainsword is just a chainsaw sword, and it goes burr, and it chainsaws things. And that sounds really loud, and it is. And the Carcharodons will sneak up on you and take their chain weapon and go burr, and just butcher you in a half a second, and then disappear. And no one will know it had happened. And even if they do hear their chain weapon go off, they will come to investigate and find your giblets splayed all over the walls and floor. And they'll go, "Oh my God, Tim's dead!" And before they can even finish saying that, brr, they've been gotten too. That's how the Carcardons do things. They're great. I am going to rewind just a little bit to Silent Hunters. I love that book. I think it's a great book. I think it's a great book if you like the Carcardons or want to get into them. It's less of a great book if you're a Dark Eldar fan. If you don't want to see the Dark Eldar just get jobbed on super hard and treated like cannon fodder, I would not. I would not recommend Silent Hunters. The Dark Eldar, the Drukhari get done dirty in Silent Hunters. Mister Albert, he is not a Dark Eldar fan. He did those guys dirty. So, in the same vein as the Carcardons, we have the Night Lords, who, as I said, are a stealth-based traitor chapter that are all about infiltrating the enemy space and then grotesquely and viscerally destroying the enemy, ripping them apart, flaying them, torturing them, and then using these acts to terrify the rest of the enemy populace. So they will, before an attack, sneak up and kidnap some people and then horribly flay them and just torture them and render their bodies all fucked up. And then fly overhead and drop those bodies on the enemy populace to terrify them. And also outfit their dreadnoughts with these displays that play recordings of the torture and destruction of the enemy that they captured to further terrify the enemy combatants. The Night Lords are all about, they're very sneaky and they have the ability to be stealthy when they need to, but they are very much not necessarily about the sneak attack in the way the Carcardons or the Raven Guard are. They are very much about using stealth to obfuscate their movements to the enemy, but they are very much about being known and being seen by the enemy in ways that induce psychological warfare. That is the shtick of the Night Lords, is entirely about psychological warfare with them. What I love about the Night Lords is kind of the inverse of with Gilliman and the Ultramarines. Whereas Gilliman was a great father and loved his sons very dearly, Conrad Kurz was not. He is up there for one of the shittiest Primarchs insofar as being a father figure and trying to be a good dad to his little gene baby sons. With that said, the Night Lords deeply, deeply love Kurz, to the point that a great number of Night Lords, even 10,000 years after Kurz's death, even 10,000 years after the heresy, are still very much bent on Kurz's vision for them. How his sons in Midnight Clad could stand as this resolute pillar of terror that the Imperium has come to break against, and both fear and respect. And that was what he wanted for his sons, even if he hated them, even if he thought they were monsters. He wanted them to fulfill their full potential, and they loved him for that. To the point that after Kurz's death, the last time every single Night Lord ever congregated in one place was as a part of a campaign to recover some great relic that they had heard of Kurz's that was on this planet. And they attack the planet, they sack the populace, they find it, and it's a recording. And it's a recording of Kurz saying how he's sorry that he failed his sons. How, despite everything, he does to some degree love them. And he wants the best for them. And it's this moment where all the Night Lords are these horrible, like, flaying babies and murdering and raping and all sorts of awful shit monsters. And just hordes of them are crying and breaking down because this is the last time their father ever got the chance to say anything, to pass it on to posterity. This was one of the last times Kurz was going to leave anything for the galaxy after his death. And what was important enough for him to leave behind? A message for his sons, saying that he's sorry and that he does care about them, even if he thinks he failed them. And that's beautiful in its own way. It's not as touching as Gilliman and the Ultramarines, because Gilliman and the Ultramarines don't flay babies, but it's still very touching and sweet and humanizing to these awful, awful monsters. And I have to say, the Night Lords are my favorite Traitor Marines. Out of everyone, out of the World Eaters, out of the Iron Warriors, out of the Alpha Legion, like out of all of them, the Night Lords hold top spot for me. And part of it is that humanization. Part of it is how flexible they are in their characterization and their direction. So, because they don't have curves around anymore, because they don't really keel to Abaddon or any specific authority of chaos, Night Lords can just be whatever you want them to be. If you're interested in making a homebrew chapter, you can write Night Lords doing whatever, and it perfectly fits. You can write Night Lords being independent pirates, chaos worshippers, even even being repentant and trying to get back into the Imperium's fold, or really diehard following Kurz's orders for them and trying to fulfill his vision. You can make Night Lords be anything. They're a very flexible chapter in their lore, and that's a lot of fun to play with, on top of this very human element that a lot of the Trader Marines just don't carry. So, why are the Carcharodons and the Night Lords together in number one? This is probably my spiciest and most contentious 40k take, because it is flagrantly in disregard of pretty much established canon. So, where did the Carcharodons come from? Who's their gene father? It is almost universally accepted that it is Corvus Corax, the father of the Raven Guard. The Raven Guard had a splinter of their chapter that was made to break off from everyone else and go out into fringe space and embark on their own crusade. And the Carcharodons are a fleet-based chapter that tends to hang out in the fringes of the galaxy, following a doctrine of battle and belief that very closely ties to that splinter of the Raven Guard. They are very pale and very dark-haired. They favor stealth tactics. Just that's Raven Guard. That's Raven Guard all the way. So it's not 100% said, but it's commonly accepted the Carcharodons are sons of Corvax. Fuck me. Sons of Corvus Corax. Which, I'm sorry I passed over it. Something I really love about the Carcharodons is, in terms of their culture, they are very much inspired by Pacific Islanders. They come from worlds that are very tropical, very ocean worlds. They tend to be very dark-skinned. I know I just said pale like Corvus, but you can be pale and ashen even if your complexion is dark. Anyway, they have a very strong Pacific Islander theme going on with their culture. They have tattoos that closely resemble various Pacific Island people. They engage in this practice where they will take the teeth of Xenos and like various monsters that they've killed and embed them in their skin, and it creates this like subdermal layer of armor, to the point that against like light melee, a Carcharodon Marine doesn't even need his power armor. Just with that subdermal layer of teeth and whatnot, he is resistant to most conventional weapons in close range. As you see in Silent Hunters. Very good book. Don't read it if you like the Drukhari. They get job done, once again. Anyway, that's an aspect of the Carcharodon culture. I just want to throw that out there because I think it's neat. Back to the both of them thing. Anyway, the Carcharodons are commonly associated to be sons of Corvus Corax. The Night Lords. The Night Lords' chief librarian, the Marine that was most in charge of their psychers while they were on the Great Crusade, was a man named Fel Zarost. Zarost was loyalist to the end, and didn't particularly like the way his legion was going when they were going traitor, and he had some feelings about that, which you can read about in whatever book he shows up in. I forget what it's called. There's like 70 fucking 40k books. It's hard to keep track of which one's which. But anyway, around the same time Fel Zarost was feeling disillusioned with his legion, Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's right-hand man and most powerful psyker to ever live that wasn't the Emperor or Magnus, Malcador was setting up the Inquisition, which he founded, because he didn't want things like this to ever happen again after the Horus Heresy. So he founded this organization whose main job was to go out and spy throughout the Imperium to root out traitors in its midst. To that purpose, he went to organize a new chapter of Astartes, composed of half loyalist Marines and half traitor Marines, that were still loyalists, like Marines from traitor legions that were still loyalist. And during this time, one of Malkador's agents approached Zarost and made him some kind of offer. We don't know the specifics of it, but shortly after that, the Grey Knights were founded. The Grey Knights being the Astartes that are made from the Emperor's own gene seed that Malkador founded as a part of the Inquisition. So it's commonly assumed that Felzarost was one of those traitor marines that helped Malkador found the Grey Knights. So, to recap all that, the Carchardons are pretty much 99% canon to be sons of Corvus Corax. And Felzarost is like 99% confirmed canon to have been one of the founding members of the Grey Knights. I hate all of that. I hate it. It is so boring. The Carchardons just being, oh, they're sons of Corvus because they're sneaky and pale. That's boring. I hate it. And the Night Lords having Felzarost, who is this super cool character who is splintering off from his legion, and oh, he gets plugged into the founding of the Grey Knights because he's a traitor and well, of a traitor legion, but still loyalist. So because he was there at the same time as the Grey Knight founding, he gets plugged, just plugged into the Grey Knights, just to fill that gap. It's so boring. I hate it. I can't fucking stand it. So what I'm about to say almost entirely contradicts canon. I don't care. I like it way more. I say the Carchardons are sons of Kurz. I say they are loyalist successors to the Night Lords. I say that when Felzarost was approached by Malkador the Sigillite and went to meet with Malkador, Malkador gave him the Void Glass, which is a MacGuffin you can read about in Silent Hunters. I'm just a shill for that book. That's Black Library isn't even paying me, and I'm shilling for their book. I need to get paid for this, guys. Come on. I believe Felzarost was given the Void Glass, the MacGuffin that's important to the Carchardons, and was ordered to set out into the fringes of space, into the void, to keep it safe from people that would abuse it, both in the Imperium and without. And in that endeavor, he ended up founding the Carchardons, who are successors to the Night Lords, because that is such a more interesting thematic story than them just being sons of Corax. Because like think about it. If they're sons of Corax, it's just that. That's it. That's the end of it. There's no thematic, bombastic finale with them being sons of Corax. But if they're sons of Kurz, you have this great incidental loop made from the Night Lords when they're first founded, through the discovery of Corvus and him fucking up his legion, to coming back around and Felzarost founding the Carchardons. Because the Carchardons are everything the Night Lords could have been. They are respected. They are feared. They are this force of terror and might that polices the most dangerous stretches of space and brings terror and fucking destruction to the hearts of anyone they face. And that is everything the Night Lords could have been. And it's so poetically beautiful for the Night Lords to have had this dark fate. The Emperor made them the way they are. He made them to be these horrible monsters that play in fear and terror and use it against their enemies. And for Kurz to also fall into that fate and falter and crash and burn because he couldn't handle the visions he was getting and his fate as a monster. And then Felzarost carries that legacy forward under Malkador's orders and founds the Carchardons, and they end up becoming everything the Night Lords could have been. That's so cool. That is so much better. I'm not saying like I am such a spectacular writer that I can do it better than the Black Library guys. I'm just saying like what was laying down for the Carchardons to be Corvus's sons is so much less satisfying than the idea that they are Kurz's sons. My speech impediment is getting me today. It is so much less satisfying than the idea that they are Corvus, or I'm trying my best here. It is so much less satisfying than the idea that they are Kurz's sons, and in this tragic, incidental way, they come about and fulfill the purpose that the Night Lords were originally meant to. Took 3 tries, I eventually got it. So that's my crazy tinfoil batshit crazy conspiracy theory about the Carcardons and the Night Lords. And I love it, and that's why they're my favorite factions. And all of these are my favorite Imperial factions. And I barely scratched the surface with any of these. There is still so much more to them than what I could lay down in like my hour and a half of, or however long this video is going to be. So if any of this piqued your interest, or you heard my mad ramblings and went, I want to learn more, I just don't want to listen to this crazy bastard about it, or anything like that, I highly recommend you look up the most beloved novels of these factions. If you go into any Warhammer 40k space and go, hey, I'm interested in the Sisters of Silence, or the Sororitas, or Rogue Traders, or whatever, what books are best for these factions, people will be so fucking happy to tell you. Like, I haven't even been asked, and I've shilled for Silent Hunter and Godblight all throughout this. So if you go asking for it, you will be readily told exactly which books are the best for whatever faction you're interested in. And you can read some fucking dope stories about cool characters doing cool things with great narratives behind them. So if any of this piqued your interest, I really hope you get into Warhammer, and I hope you love it just as much as I do, because it's really cool. And I hope you give it a chance. My name is Elliot Geltz, and this is so unstructured. This is such an unprofessional video. I don't care. I had fun making it, and I hope you have fun watching it. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you later.